Hello, sisters. Welcome to the Sacred Medicine Podcast, weaving powerful, soulful practices into functional medicine. Step into this beautiful space of devotion and explore everything from nurturing foods, rituals, sexuality, and awakening your innate sensuality. It is time to own your radiance. This is the Sacred Medicine Podcast. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Sacred Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Margaret Romero, and today's guest is Sheri Winston. This is such a juicy interview. We talk about all the things that contribute to low libido, how to improve or even start learning about having orgasms. And we also talk about her favorite sex toys. We get a little glimpse into the behind the scenes of Sheri Winston. And on to the show. I am so happy to have Sheri Winston joining us on an interview. She is a celebrated sexuality teacher, award-winning author, and medical professional. She offers classes, workshops, and retreats online and in-person venues such as sexuality boutiques, classes, conferences, and educational institutions. She also teaches the general public and offers professional level training for healthcare providers, counselors, and educators. She also has several books out, which one I just bought called Women's Anatomy of Arousal, Secret Maps to Buried Pleasure, and also Succulent Sexcraft, Your Hands-On Guide to Erotic Play and Practice. Well, Sheri, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. Such a pleasure to be chatting with you.
Yes. Well, I first met Sheri. I took a workshop from you. This was years ago. And this is when you were doing live in-person training. I'm not sure if you're still doing them or not. Mm-hmm. But it was on female ejaculation. And it was such a great talk. I loved it. And then I met you up again when I was part of the Mama Gina School of Womanly Arts, and I was in something called Inner Circle, and Sheri was one of our speakers one evening. And she had this amazing, to this day I'll never forget it, amazing ability to orgasm through breath, through breathing, deep breathing. And it was something that I have not mastered. But I know
it's good to have goals, though.
And it was just an amazing experience to see you. And then I just got to see you again just a couple weeks ago at the SHE Expo in Brooklyn. So, and that's when I picked up her new book and diving into that. And so it's been really through years and years, I've sort of known you and known of you and been taught by you. So I'm so happy to be here with you today. So let me just give you a little bit of background. I have a functional medicine practice right now. And one of the biggest things that I see are women who really complain about low libido. Or you know what? Sometimes they don't even complain about it. They don't even talk about it until I ask them. And I'm very frank and open with my patients. And come to find out that a lot of them aren't having sex at all, or or married or single or with a boyfriend or whatever, with a girlfriend.
Or with themselves necessarily.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
And because they're just really not, their libido is shot. It's non-existent. They're anorgasmic. So I would love to hear from you some things about, a woman where she can sort of start this journey of being able to tap into that beautiful part of her that hasn't been so fulfilled?
That's a great question, and it's a big question. So I'm going to kind of take parts of it, because we have women who've not yet learned to have an orgasm, or who the experience of getting to an orgasm is not assured. Sometimes they have them, sometimes they don't. They don't really know why or how or how to make that happen. So, and that category of women is a substantial number of women, between the ones who haven't ever had the experience or don't have it easily or regularly or proficiently. That's a lot of women right there. So we've got the orgasm issue, which I'll talk about more. And then we have sort of the libido issue, which is about desire, and I see tons of that as well. So I'm going to sort of separate those two things out a bit, because, some women, they have the libido, but the orgasm is an issue, and other women, the libido is an issue, and some women it's both, right?
Right.
So we've got an intersection. But I'll just start with just saying, for women who haven't learned to be proficient with their orgasm, the key thing I want them to hear is you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. There's just stuff you haven't learned yet. Just like playing an instrument or speaking another language. So I want women to frame it that way. You're not broken. It doesn't have to always be like this. If you want to learn how to have orgasms, you can learn. It's one of the things I teach. I mean, there's not a lot of places to go learn, right? It's not like you want to, learn how to play tennis and you go take tennis lessons, right?
Right.
Or if you want to speak French, you go to a French class. So there's not a lot of places to go to find orgasm classes, but there are people like me and some other educators and folks like that who can actually help you figure out what it is you need to learn, what skills you need to learn, how to use your inner tools, I call them, but your inner abilities like breathing, sound, intention and imagination, self-love, all of these inner skills that we have. So it's about learning to use them consciously. Sometimes there's unlearning we have to do. And that means getting rid of beliefs and stories that don't serve us well, like pleasure is sinful, or maybe pleasure is just indulgent, right? So we have to reframe some of these stories, or stories about, nice girls, and how they behave. So there's some things that we might have to unlearn and some things to learn. And if you want to, you can. So that's sort of the sort of very simple framework I want to give about orgasm.
Okay.
And if you want to talk more about that, we can. But the libido question is I think in some ways even a more complex question. Because I also see tons of women in classes or clients or online who are having issues with libido. And libido is tricky because there's so many things that influence it. So it could be that somebody's really got a kind of internal biochemical hormonal challenge. If your adrenal glands aren't working very well, for example.
Yes.
Then you're not going to have a lot of life energy. And if you don't have a lot of life energy, then you're not going to have a lot of erotic energy. Right. Sometimes there are, we're so stressed in our culture. We're like this, all this, anxiety and deadlines and beeping screens that want our attention and things like that. So when we're in that overly stressed place, we produce the hormones of stress, cortisol in particular, but other ones as well. And those things are like the antidote to the biochemicals of pleasure and arousal. We have a lot of people who are depressed, who are anxious, and depression and anxiety also block arousal energy. And then there's the medications that are often given to treat those conditions, and they can also cause your libido to tank.
Absolutely.
Right. So we've got those kinds of factors. Birth control, hormonal birth control can cause decreased libido. And then because, our sexuality, I think what I teach something called I call holistic sexuality, which is really about how our sexuality connects to everything and all the parts of us and everything around us. But our sexuality is also about our relationships. So low libido can be about our relationship with ourselves. We're not loving ourselves well. We're maybe have self-esteem issues or judgments, criticisms, all these negative self-messages, and that can kill our libido. And then we've got relationship issues. If we are in an intimate erotic relationship with one or more partners, when our relationships aren't working well, that's going to affect our libido. And then there's more, which is long-term relationships, which have that particular challenge of our partners becoming familiar, like family. And we're actually biologically programmed to not want to have sex with our family members. Right? So how do we desire what we have?
Right.
Right? So all of these things are part of this picture. And so, anyone who's just sort of starts with libido issues, then I think we need to delve deeper and see which of these different areas might need addressing for that person. And it can be different. I didn't add menopause for a lot of women can tank your libido, as can childbirth. Postpartum and breastfeeding also can really tank your libido. And then parenting.
Yes.
Another energetics, sucks. So there's so many factors that in a sense there's not one answer, but it's about kind of looking at all these different factors and then figuring out which ones you can address or which ones you want to address. Does that make sense?
Yes. And going back to what you were saying about birth control pills, it's like every woman is on them. Every woman from the age
kind of hormonal
from
contraception, right? Some of the long-acting hormonal methods or pills. Most women are
18 or however long. Sometimes just using it, taking them for, PMS symptoms to acne. They get put on birth control. But just put yourself on birth control. Oh, you're not sexually active. It's okay. It'll help your acne.
Yeah, and then, menopausal. Menstrual problems of any kind, they also often treat with birth control pills.
Yeah. And so I see that so much too. Women who just flatline libido. And it could be as simple as being on that birth control for years upon years and years.
Yes, the irony of birth control pills. Right? And you're on the pills so you can have sex, but now you don't want to.
Yes, so true. And so, yes, hormones. I love all of these because it's definitely something I see in my practice so much, time and time again. Hormones also, a woman who is, high cortisol levels. They are stressed or they are running their companies. They're an entrepreneur or they're a mother. They are doing things all day, hardly sleeping. And
sleep.
Yeah.
Sleep is a factor, right?
Absolutely.
Not getting enough sleep.
And so then you see, there's just no wonder with what we put our bodies through that we end up having these low libidos. Well, share with us a little bit about, let's say a woman does not have any, I would find it a little hard to believe they don't have any issues with adrenals or a little bit of hormone stuff going on. But let's say they're not on medications and really they do family planning or, rhythm method and they're not on birth control. Or the libido is, it's normal. They find that they're attracted to their boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, and they just cannot actually peak in orgasm. So share a little bit about what are some of the reasons behind that.
So, orgasmic proficiency, let's start with that concept, means that you can get to your orgasm sooner or later, one way or another. That's like the basic proficiency. that that a lot of women haven't yet attained. I'll just mention, by the way, that then we can go on to develop mastery, which is a more advanced concept. But again, anyone can learn these things. But just to develop proficiency is sort of the starting point. And the thing about women and sort of how our plumbing and our wiring, as it were, is that most of us need to learn our path to orgasm. Not all of us. Some of us figured it out when we were 3 years old, right? I know women who had orgasms, from when they were toddlers that they remember. But most of us, somewhere perhaps around adolescence, puberty, we had to start learning how we operate. And some of us didn't quite figure that out. Nothing wrong with you, because most of us didn't get a map.
Right.
And we didn't get training. We didn't have anyone saying, go inside. See, because each of us, we're like our own learning laboratory. And so when I'm teaching, I'm always telling people, your job is to run experiments and see what works in your laboratory. Mm-hmm. To go inside and find what you need to do to figure out how to get aroused, how to get deeply aroused, how to get fully engorged, which is another piece we might want to talk about, such as an anatomy piece, and then how to have an orgasm. And the best way of learning that for most of us is in our solo sex experience.
Right.
And I use the term solo sex instead of the word masturbation because I hate the word masturbation. First of all,
I do too.
It's a yucky word.
I hate it.
Yuck. But do you know what it means?
Yeah.
Do you know the Latin? Right?
Oh, no, I don't.
Oh, the Latin means to pollute with your hand.
Oh.
Okay. There's some sex negative cultural concepts, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I call it solo sex. So our solo sex is our foundational learning laboratory. It's our self-care spa. It's our rehearsal hall. And like I said, it's where we can explore, we can practice, we can experiment. So the first thing for most women that I always say is the place to learn this is by yourself. Because again, like playing an instrument, you wouldn't expect to master your instrument if all you ever played was duets.
Right.
Right? You've got to practice by yourself because when we're playing a duet, we have to pay attention to somebody else. What are their needs? What do they want? Are they having fun? Do they like the music? Should I be helping them play their instrument? There's a whole other level of stuff going on to have partnered sex. But when you're just by yourself, all you have to do is pay attention to you. It's all about you. And that's really an important thing, to be able to focus on yourself, tune into your experiences, play in your own imagination with what turns you on, play with your body to discover what turns you on, and learn how to go more deeply into your erotic trance. Because here's the thing about arousal. Arousal is an altered state of consciousness. It's a specific kind of trance state. And we can learn how to enhance the trance. And we can get very skilled at doing that. And again, it's like any other learning. If I was learning to play the piano, at first I would feel awkward and I have to think about what I'm doing, and that dot on the page means this finger hits that key. But if I keep practicing, one day the music's just going to flow out my hands. Mm-hmm. Right? That's fluency. And we can all get to that level with our erotic skills. But that takes some time, some practice. It takes enough self-love to want to give yourself the time and the space to value your own pleasure enough to do it. And I'll just add, and this kind of touches into the libido issue as well. For a lot of women, the more often we run that erotic energy, the more we go into that erotic trance, the easier it is to get into our erotic trance. And the less we go there, the harder it gets. Okay. So one of the things, if you want to fire up your libido, is literally bringing yourself into your arousal on a regular basis. It might mean 5 or 10 minutes of playing with yourself every day for a month, and then see where your libido is at the end of that. Doesn't necessarily even have to include orgasm. Just getting yourself turned on, 4 times a week or something. Orgasm's optional, but a lovely addition to that practice. And that for a lot of women is going to increase their libido. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, so learning to become orgasmic, learning those pathways, expanding the pathways, developing more and more ways of turning yourself on, waking parts of you up that have gone to sleep. Mm-hmm. Are all ways that we can learn to become first proficient, and then, like I said, ultimately really masterful with our erotic energy. It's like orchestrating an orchestra, right?
Right.
We need a little strings here, and we need the drum, and here's the rhythm for everyone to play with. So we're like our own orchestra. Now,
what about women who don't really know where to touch? They've never touched themselves. Yeah. They don't know what anything looks like down there. Mm-hmm. They were, and maybe, and this is probably a different question aside too, but I think that sometimes we can be very ashamed of that, and sensuality and sexuality is sort of something that were sort of shameful things growing up. Mm-hmm. So, how do you get rid of that? And then also, where do you start when knowing, like, what do I touch? I don't know, the clitoris. Should I be using, a toy? Can you expand on that a little?
Well, let's start with the where do you start? But then let's make sure we come back to the shame issue, because that's significant also.
Okay.
But let's kind of just, where do you start? Again, because nobody's ever said, okay, well, here's how you play with yourself. So first I'll say, well, of course, there is no one right way. But some things to keep in mind is that you can start, you don't have to start with it even being sexual. You can start with just getting in touch with your body, how it feels. So, and you can work that into other things you're doing. So when you're in the shower and you're soaping yourself, just slow that down and tune in and notice that it feels pleasurable. Start to kind of notice the pleasure you get in your body. If you're dancing or stretching, tuning in and noticing, it feels good to move. It feels good to stretch. Mm-hmm. And then you can actually just start with kind of enhancing that pleasure by breathing into it, just enhancing your breathing a little deeper, making little sighs or sounds. You get in the shower and the cold day and the hot water's pouring over you. Go, right? And right, just make some little sounds of pleasure. If you're eating a mango or a piece of chocolate, or really start to play with your sound. Sound is such a powerful tool. So you can start there. You don't have to even start necessarily by touching your genitals. Right. The next thing I would say is to be a good lover to yourself. And you might have a good idea of how you would like a partner to be with your body. And generally, I'll speak for myself, I don't want my partner to start out a lovemaking session by touching my genitals first. Mm-hmm. In fact, that would piss me off. Right? I would be annoyed, right? Because obviously my partner is better trained than that. He would never do that.
Of course.
But it is important to recognize that if I wanted to start playing with him, I could go right for his crotch. Right?
Right.
And he would be fine with that.
Right.
He'd be like, oh, good. She's playing with my penis. Okay. So that wouldn't work for me. So when I'm being a lover to myself, I want to try and kind of treat myself the way I'd want someone to treat me. So that might mean Like, get some nice massage oil that you really like, some natural oil or coconut oil, and start by rubbing your belly, or rubbing, stroking up your own thigh. And play with your hair, right? I mean, just start with touching non-sexual parts of your body. And then bring your touch perhaps to your breasts, maybe not to your crotch first. So, massage your belly a little, stroke your belly, and then just stroke your breasts. And again, just tune in, notice how it feels, breathe into it, make some sounds of pleasure, and just notice, kind of train yourself to notice. That's the really foundational mind skill, is awareness of how do I like this? Does this feel good? Is this pleasurable? Is this turning me on?
Yes.
Another nice way to start is activating your imagination. Very powerful mind tool that we've got there. And so that might be recalling a sexy scene you saw in a movie, or an experience you had that was very hot, or a fantasy you have. It doesn't have to be something you'd ever do, right? This is the important thing about your mind. There's no mind crime. You could be in a monogamous relationship, but in your mind, it's okay to imagine having erotic experiences with other people. It doesn't mean you're going to do that, but you can imagine it. So you might want to start by reading little erotic short stories. It often works for women. We tend to like stories. We tend to want context and characters. So take a little time and get your mind turned on. And then when you do touch your genitals, you might want to start by just putting your whole hand over your whole vulva and just breathing and bringing your awareness into your hand and then into your vulva, and then maybe pulsing your pelvic floor muscles. Another one of the keys to turning ourselves on is using those pelvic floor muscles. And then maybe start stroking like you'd pet a cat, nice big, sort of slow, sensual stroking on the outside. Another thing that's very useful for women to know is what equipment we actually have. And this is kind of one of my big soapboxes, which is that the vast majority of the books, the textbooks, the sex books, they don't actually include all the pleasure parts that we actually have. Women have a whole network of structures made out of erectile tissue. I call it the erectile network. And the head of the clitoris is just one part of that whole network of structures. But if you don't know where all those parts are, you're not going to take time to rub them and pet them and squeeze them, and you're not going to get that whole network of erectile tissue engorged. And that's what we want to learn how to do. So I think it's really helpful. That's my first book is Women's Anatomy of Arousal. It's all the parts women actually have, including the ones you've probably never heard of, even if you're a healthcare provider, even if you're a sex teacher. So the 3 parts of the clitoris, the vestibular bulbs, the 2 inner sponges of erectile tissue. So it's really helpful to have that map and find all those parts and play with each of them and get them big and puffy and juicy and turned on. And when you've got the more outer parts engorged, then it's a good time to play with the head of the clitoris. And then it might be a good time to have some internal play and internal stimulation. Because for most women, our arousal moves from the outside of us to the edges, to the more non-sexual parts, then to the more erogenous zones, then to the outer parts of our body, the outer parts of our genitals, and then to the inner parts. And we often go inside. We get into the vagina. We get into that inner temple way too soon. And particularly if we partner with men. I'm not knocking men, but remember their erotic energy tends to move in the opposite direction. So their energy might be starting in their genitals. Right. And so they're often ready to be, to penetrate and be and enveloped before we're actually ready to be penetrated.
So
And we
true.
might, right? We might have a tendency to kind of go along with it because we think that's what's supposed to happen, or that's how the script goes, or they're ready, so we should be, or we think it's taking too long. For most women to get to that point where penetration is going to feel great, that could take 30 to 45 minutes to get there, and that's normal. So those are all really useful things to understand in our self-pleasuring and also in our partner sets.
I think what's really important too is once you learn what you really love, or I really love when I massage my inner thighs, or when I go from my belly down into my inner thighs, that feels so good. And as with a partner, you can also then teach him or her how to do the same thing. And I think a lot of times women are like, okay, well, the guy should know what to do. He should know how to turn me on. And he's not doing the right thing if I can't orgasm. And I think it really starts with you. You really need to know what turns you on, what feels good for you. And then it's okay to tell the person you're with what you like. And if it's too soft or too hard, to let them know it's okay to speak up and to say it in the midst of and the throes of passion. I think it's perfectly fine and normal. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's really important. I think there are no psychic partners out there. No one is born knowing how to pleasure somebody else or how to turn someone else on. We usually have to learn how we operate.
Right.
So part of our job as a good partner is to help our partners to be a teacher, to learn what they like and to teach what we like and how to, there's a skill level to this too, which is how to do it in a way that's fun and erotic and comfortable. Boy, did no one ever teach us those skills, right? In the movies, you never see people talking about anything, right?
Right.
But in real life, if we want to have a great erotic connection with somebody else, we definitely need to figure out how to get the communication into our relationship. And there's lots of ways to do it. And again, it's learnable. But we shouldn't expect that we're going to know how to do that or be comfortable doing that when we're first learning. And again, it starts with ourselves. I mean, you made that point, but I just want to emphasize that first I need to figure out what works for me before I can teach somebody else.
Exactly. So coming back to the shame portion, I grew up in a family that was extremely strict, very Catholic, and I needed to hide my body where, I couldn't wear miniskirts or, God forbid. So there was always this, like, you need to tone it down. You cannot be sensual or sexual. Like, you can't. That's bad. You're a bad girl then.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's going to be different messages that different people have depending on their upbringing and their spiritual traditions and, and their experiences. And some people, for some people, sexual pleasure is a sin. For me, it's not a sin. It's just indulgent. It's like it's a waste of time. I should be doing something useful. Right? It's sort of in the lazy realm, And I will say for those of us who are sort of entrepreneurs or something, there is this kind of pressure to be working. That Protestant work ethic we got from our culture. Right? Work is important and pleasure is not. So I think there's this whole range of messages. I will also add, in particular for women, we've got this deluge of messages about our bodies, how they look, how they should operate, good, bad, mostly bad, right?
Yeah.
It's too big or it's too small. It's just not right. It's the wrong shape. It's the wrong size. It's the wrong color. It doesn't work right. I mean, just endless millions of messages that we've all received. I saw a study once that said something like over 80% of women during every sexual encounter they have reported having negative body image, negative body messages come up and interfere with their pleasure.
Oh.
Yeah, and that doesn't surprise me. So things about shame. Shame is a powerful emotion. It's very foundational, of the sort of most basic emotions we have, happy, sad, angry, and shame is one of those. I mean, it's very foundational, and I think it's kind of useful to look at that from an evolutionary perspective. I'm like an anatomy kind of evolutionary biology geek. But, how did shame serve us from an evolutionary perspective? We're a tribal species. That means we've got to get along with our tribe, because if we don't and we get thrown out of the tribe, we will die, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's kind of the most basic foundational thing, is that humans, we need our tribe to survive. So I think shame comes from when we do something that's against the rules, the unspoken rules usually of the tribe, we feel shame. And that is so powerful a motivator, because we don't want to feel shame. Shame is an awful feeling. We don't want to feel shame. And so, shame, humiliation, that whole kind of category that we kind of felt like we're never going to do that again. We're not going to do that thing that's going to get us shamed and possibly thrown out of the tribe, and then we're going to die. Does that resonate?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I think it's useful because to sort of see how deeply embedded in our mind, body, psyche, shame is, and how powerful it is. So just sort of recognizing the power of it, I think, is a good starting place. And then we can start to reprogram ourselves, because all of these shame messages are things we learned. Babies don't feel shame. Young toddlers don't feel shame.
Right.
When do we start feeling that? When do we start getting self-conscious and shame and humiliation? As we're getting to be older toddlers and young children. So these are cultural messages, stories that we absorbed totally unconsciously, usually, that we then believe are true because they're deep in our programming. Mm-hmm. But it is programming, and that means we can reprogram it.
That's true. Yep.
So we learned it, we can unlearn it and replace it with a different story and a different message. And that is I'm going to say it's probably a lifetime project.
Right. Right.
It's not like, okay, I've gotten rid of all those negative internal messages. But I have gotten rid of some. And other ones I've turned them way down. And part of that is consciously reprogramming. And a really simple, one of the simplest ways to do that is to first notice the negative message. So maybe you have a negative message that your genitals are yucky. Right? A lot of women have that one. Mm-hmm. Your genitals are yucky. And you look at that and you go, they're not yucky. They're beautiful and they give pleasure. And my goodness, I was born from a woman's genitals. This is the gateway. This is like a sacred part of my body. So, but you've got this inner message. So you can start reprogramming by give yourself like 3 positive messages. You might want to even, sort of write down that negative and write down 3 or more sort of positives. Mm-hmm. And then just notice when the negative comes up and then just say the 3 positives, let it go. Every time it comes up. So every time you think, I hate my genitals, or they're ugly or yucky or smelly or whatever the negative is, just go, my genitals are a beautiful flower. My genitals are a sacred, pleasure-giving part of my body. I love my genitals, or use whatever word you like to use. Mm-hmm. And then let it go. And then the next time that negative pops up, you just say your 3 positives again and you let it go. You might do that every 2 minutes sometimes. But what you'll do over time is you start reprogramming. And that negative is going to come up less and less and less. And then there'll be another one to work on beyond that, right?
Right.
Right. But we can really reprogram. And also, just to mention, if you are partnered, your partner can help with that. You can share with your partner, I just have this negative feeling about my genitals and I don't want to have that. And these are the positives I'm focusing on. And then when you're with your partner, in a loving or erotic way, they can say, I love how your genitals look. Mm-hmm. They're so beautiful. They smell delicious. I love pleasuring them. I really enjoy touching them or licking them, whatever. And they can help with that reprogramming as well. So, and we can reprogram, and then that helps get rid of that piece of the shame.
And I think, even doing some mirror work and looking down and really exploring, you've got some great diagrams, right, in your book, the Women's Anatomy of Arousal book that you have.
Yep. All the parts you really have, and lots of ideas about how to play with them and pleasure them and honor them and learn how they operate, because this is our instrument. This is our temple, and we can learn to honor it and pleasure it or not, right? It's up to us if we want to do that or not.
And it's amazing that all the years of schooling, you're a nurse midwife, so did they ever teach you about all the different pathways of the clitoris and the bulbs and this, that, and the other?
No. I'm actually a certified nurse midwife, gynecology practitioner, registered nurse, licensed massage therapist, doula, and a childbirth educator. So I studied this area of the body pretty extensively.
Yeah.
And I was already working as a midwife before I started to discover there were parts that were not included in my education. And in fact, there's a book called New View of a Woman's Body. And I came across that book probably in the early 90s. And I read, and it said I had vestibular bulbs. And I went, I have what? I've never heard of vestibular bulbs. And so I immediately did my homework because I'm such a good student and I own the equipment. And they're made of erectile tissue and they puff up. They get engorged. They get really obvious. And I found them and I played with them and they puffed up. And I distinctly remember sitting there looking in a mirror at my own genitals going, holy cow, how did I miss this? How is it that I went to school for all those years and I've had my fingers in thousands of vaginas?
Right.
I mean, how did I not know that this existed? And that got me going on, what I now call the hunt for buried pleasure, finding the other pleasure parts that got left out and figuring out how they connect and, and understanding things like the uterus is a player in arousal and orgasm and, just, putting all these things together, some that I learned in anatomy class, some that I learned maybe in a tantra class, some that I learned by being a student of birth, just by being, present and aware, at birth. Some I learned from myself and my own body and other women's bodies and just kind of going like, oh, this is all connected. This is a system, an elegant, brilliant, wonderful system for pleasure and birth and, and reproduction and all of these things are connected. They're not separate and it's connected into our emotional system and our psyche. And it was pretty mind-boggling to me. So that's how I kind of evolved this really integral model of female sexuality and anatomy. But I do want to say, I stand on the shoulders of giants, as the phrase goes, because there are the women who went sort of before me and figured out other pieces of this.
So it's amazing how you made such a beautiful discovery, and clearly this book should really be in the hands of all women. It should be part of a book in high school, like that,
Yeah.
that during, what I learned back then was hardly anything about sexuality, but this should be one of those books. But what about the fact that since we have the equipment and a lot of us may know about certain things. Okay, well, we have the clitoris and, the vagina and the G-spot, but there's so much more than that. And then you have a man that's also just trying to figure it out too. It's really, I think, just to reiterate again, like the importance of really knowing what works for you. And I think that you outline it beautifully in the book, and just more ways that women can really become aroused. I think that in itself is so eye-opening. And then once you know all of that, then you can just have your partner. I mean, a willing partner. I mean, what man or woman's not going to want to participate in some exploration as well? It's like a fun night after night.
Lots of fun nights there. And I think that that's one of the sort of reframings that we might want to have about our intimate partnerships, which is that we're in an ongoing learning, teaching relationship with our partners. And especially if we do want to be with somebody long term, that we also have to develop communication skills and ways to make things fun and exciting. And one of the ways to do that is to keep being in this mindset of exploration and experimenting, so that we can keep having fun. But again, these are skills. Nobody taught me how to talk to partners. I didn't see it modeled anywhere ever. Still hardly ever do. And that took me so long to figure out. Well, first that you are supposed to talk during sex.
Right.
When I was a teenager and in my early 20s, I thought you weren't supposed to say anything, right? You know what I mean? Like, I didn't think talking was part of it. You just did stuff. And somewhere in my early 20s, it started to occur to me like, I need to be able to talk to my partner and realize I didn't have language. I had no words I was comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know how to talk about it. I had so many anxieties that my partner was going to feel criticized or told what to do. And they're supposed to know, and it was a real gift to me when I, had partners, and I could say to them, ideally before we're having sex, something like, I'm trying to learn how to communicate while we're having sex. And have partners go, yes, that would be so great.
Right. Because they want to know.
Right. So, so we could at least be on the same page of, I don't know how to do this. It feels uncomfortable and awkward, but I want to do it because it's going to help us have better connection and better sex. And we can kind of figure that out together. So, just that alone, having that kind of conversation.
Now,
with
partners. Do you teach that?
I do. Right now I've been, this last year, I have not been traveling around and teaching all over and teaching my whole very wide curriculum of courses. I've been working on online courses this year and experimenting with that and playing with that. And I'm not even quite sure where I'm going next with this. I'm not sure if I'm going to try different kinds of online courses. I don't know exactly. I have to kind of do a reassessment at the end of the year, but I do think erotic communication, which is there's basic communication skills just for relationships, right? How to talk to each other when you have a partner, and then there's how do we do that in the bedroom or wherever it is we're having sex. How do we do that in a way that's erotic, right? That it's part of the game, part of the turn on, as opposed to a distraction or something. So there's sort of multiple levels of that communication, because I never learned good basic relationship communication skills, not from my parents for sure.
Same here. Same here.
Right? They really lack those skills badly. So, so, I feel like I've been, for, I don't know, 30 something years, trying to learn and teach myself just how to talk to other human beings, particularly intimate partners, in ways that are, loving and useful and constructive, like nonviolent communication techniques, things like that. And then how to take that and bring it into the erotic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we are coming close to the end of this juicy, delicious conversation. I could really talk to you so much longer about this stuff. Is there anything that maybe we didn't touch upon that you wanted to add?
Well, I think I'm going to reiterate something, because I think so many people, when it comes to their erotic lives, just don't feel great about them. And so I want people to feel wonderful about their erotic lives, and have this be a source of joy and something you celebrate, whether it's by yourself or with partners. And so the idea that these are learnable skills is so important to me. It's not like the orgasm fairy came over my cradle and sprinkled orgasm dust on me. Everything I can do, including like having orgasms at all, I learned how to do. And then I learned the next skill, and then I learned the next skill, and then I learned how to help partners help me do it. And, so I think it's so useful to know that there is a learning journey. A lot of it we've done maybe unconsciously, but anytime we want to, we can start getting conscious about it and going, okay, what do I want to learn? And I think the useful thing is that you can find people like me who kind of go like, all right, well, it took me 20 years to learn that skill because I didn't have anyone teaching me.
Right.
And I didn't have a map to follow. But here's a map. Here's the lessons. Here's how you can learn to, get yourself more turned on. Here's how you can learn to play nicely with others. And you can learn these things a lot faster than I did. And again, you don't have to, but you can if you want to. And it's never too late to learn this stuff.
Oh, definitely not. Okay. Well, I've got 3 quick questions that I typically end my interviews with. Let's see. What is currently on your bedside table?
Well, right at this minute, my cat whose belly I'm rubbing while we're talking. Oh gosh, my bedside table. There's a pile of books. There's a pile of on the floor by my bedside table. In a bin, there's a pile of sex toys. So I just got a bunch of new toys that I can for me to review. So I'm in the enviable position now of often getting free sex toys. So I can review them. So now I've got this like pile of things there. Well, I've got a really busy couple of weeks ahead of me. Gosh, what else is on my table? I have all kinds of natural lubes and goos and things. So I've wonderful yoni cream made by this company that hand makes organic yoni cream and coconut oil.
Tell me about the yoni cream.
Oh.
Who is that by?
That is the yoni cream is by Avena Botanicals, which is a wonderful company. They hand make these creams, and I am going to review it sometime soon. It's velvety. It feels so good, smells so good, tastes so good. So that's good. I've got a big glass of water and a bendy straw. That's important. Mm-hmm. But you know what else is important? It's what I don't have next to my bed. I do not have a phone. I do not have a computer. I do not have a TV in my bedroom. I do not bring my phone to bed at night.
Good for you.
So just saying, what's not by my bed is a device. I've got lots of toys, but not a device that that I'm going to pick up and check, or it's going to interrupt me, or it's going to, take me out. So I like to keep my bed for sleeping, reading, and pleasure. And so there's nothing near my bed that isn't dedicated to one of those three things.
I hear you. I don't have a TV, nor have I ever had a TV in my bedroom, ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too. Yeah. But the phone thing, nowadays, when I say to people, when they're talking about, enhancing their erotic lives, and I mention not having their phone by the bed, a lot of people look at me like I'm insane at this point.
Oh, I don't have a phone by my bed.
Yeah, me too.
No way.
So, yeah.
Oh, so that leads me to my second question. What is your favorite sex toy?
Ooh, that's a little tricky.
It got too many
Well,
favorites.
all right, I'm going to have to go. My Hitachi magic wand is still my go-to sex toy. I have what's called the G-spotter attachment on it, with the hard version, because it's so multi-purpose. So you can play with it outside, you can play with it inside. It's got a nice long handle, which makes it easy to use. It's got, and I actually have two versions. I have the old-fashioned plug-in one, and I have the newer rechargeable. And I still have to say my old-fashioned plug-in one with just the 2 speeds is still probably my most basic go-to sex toy. But I've also I have a Sybian now. And that's a little more, because I kind of have to take it out, so it's a little more setup involved. But
oh my God. Okay,
yeah.
You have to tell people what this is, because when I saw you at the Sex Expo, I saw this thing.
Yeah, so the Sybian
is amazing.
It's amazing. So it's like a half barrel shape that has attachments on top, and you sit on it. And it's a expensive toy, way more expensive than your average sex toys by far.
Mm-hmm.
But remember when I was talking before about the female erectile network?
Yeah. When
you're sitting on the Sybian, it stimulates the whole network.
My God.
And no other toy does that. So I've become very fond of my Sybian.
Listen, I so desire one. And the person that was at your booth, I put my email.
Her booth, actually, right? So the Sybian booth. She invited me.
Yes.
She's a friend now, and also sponsors. By the way, if you take any of our surveys or contests on our website, you're entered into a drawing to win the Sybian. We're going to be giving a Sybian away probably in February next year. So, and every time we have a new survey or contest, you can enter again. So you should go to my website. Everyone should go to my website and do that, because they're, fun little surveys, and you could win one. So they're sort of a sponsor of our surveys right now. But that toy is really, but it's a little more, like elaborate. You kind of, but it's not like, here, I'm going to have like a quickie before I go to bed.
No, this thing, once you get on it, it's luxurious. So
once you get on it, you don't really want to get off.
It's like you ride it, and then there's all these different attachments. Penis, they look like regular penises with the head and everything, and they come in all different sizes. Whatever your preference is, from small to extra large. And I just...
And even if you don't like penetration, there's flat ones that there's no penetration that you just sit on. So, I mean, it's really fun.
It moves, right? It moves.
It vibrates and it rotates. So, yeah.
I mean, this thing is the ultimate. Okay, so aside from that magic wand, anything else, like another top one that you love? Because I just found a new one.
Yeah. Well, right now I've got a pile of new things to try, but I will just, and I have a number of other ones that I like. But I tend to like things that have kind of a low, kind of rumbly vibration, not like the high pitched kind of ones. Right. Which is why I love the magic wand.
Okay.
But I have another one that I like a lot. It's called the Stronic. I call it Thumper. but it's shaped like a regular sort of internal dildo shaped vibe, but instead of vibrating, it moves kind of in and out.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh, wow. Right. Much more of a sensation like you might get from intercourse, this kind of in and out motion that it does. And that's pretty high up on my list because, like I said, it's really a different vibration.
It's called Stronic.
The Stronic, yeah.
Okay, I'll get the.
Yeah.
I'll put it in the show notes, ladies.
Okay, I got one more for you, and it's called the We Vibe. Do you know the We Vibe?
I do.
I love my We Vibe too.
The We Vibe.
Yeah,
Now,
so never like running down my list, but the We Vibe is really nice because what I love about the We Vibe is it's how do you describe the shape of it? It's like almost like the shape of your thumb and your first finger.
Yes.
Like a C that you squish, but one end goes inside and the other end rests sort of on the head of your little clitoris. Mm-hmm. And what I love about it is it will stay inside. Like a lot of things that you put inside, if you squeeze your muscles, they're going to kind of go flying out unless you're holding onto it.
Right.
But the We Vibe stays inside, so it's great for sort of hands-free. And you can leave it in if you're having penetration with a penis or another toy as well.
Right.
So, yeah.
Now, have you tried the Womanizer, or is that one of the toys that you have to try, or it's now called the Satisfier?
I haven't. Should I?
Yes.
Okay.
It was the Satisfier was actually at that expo, mm-hmm. and it's a device, and it's like a circular tip, but it's like a mm-hmm. hole. And it vibrates, and you put a little lube on that, and you put it on your clitoris, and it just has this slight sucking sensation. Mm. And it has 11 different volumes or ranges of suction.
Oh, that sounds fun.
So that one I've been enjoying immensely, and I'll put that on the show notes as well.
Okay, I'll look.
All right. And I think that is it for today. Thank you so much. This has been such a sexy, erotic call that, I've loving all of the different avenues we went into, from anatomy, talking about the libido, orgasms, shame, when we hit on some really big topics. And everyone, you need to get her book, Woman's Anatomy of Arousal by Sheri Winston. So,
the other thing is my website. I've got tons of blogs and information there too. So, go visit intimateartcenter.com, and lots of free information you can get there, and find out about books and online courses and whatever else it is I'm going to do next.
Very nice. All right, Sheri, it was such a pleasure. I will talk to you soon.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you as well.
Well, thank you so much for listening. I really hope that you enjoyed this conversation with Sheri Winston. And to learn more about her and all of the books and the toys that we talked about, it will all be in the show notes at margaretromero.com/episode 2. And to continue this juicy conversation, also join me on the private Facebook group at margaretromero.com/Facebook. And we will see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.